Hey guys, it's Raythe, Kat, and Sylvia here. I'm going to have everybody introduce ourselves. We are the three raccoons in a trench coat that make up pretty much the heart of Raythe Rain. And we had this crazy idea that we wanted to share with you guys sort of like what we're doing, what's going on in our heads, and then hear from you the same things. Because we often talk during our Raythe Rain meetings about everything ranging from video games to gossip out there to, of course, what's going on in the book world. As you guys know, I am Raythe, or ex Aratari. I am the author and chief raccoon. Kat, why don't you go next?
I'm Kat. I'm a raccoon. I don't know. I guess
Panda.
Yeah, basically. Well, the thing is that raccoons are pretty resourceful, and so that's why the raccoon is my spirit animal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're all so adorable and eat too much.
Definitely.
Hey guys, I'm Sylvia. I am the graphics designer for fonts. I don't do a single illustration on the site, so please don't give me any of that credit. So that's what I do in relationship to the site, but mostly, what is the energy that I bring to the group? I'd say I'm kind of like, I don't know. What do you guys think? Am I just fellow raccoon?
You're definitely a trash panda too.
I am, absolutely. I'm big into trash.
Yeah, let's put it this way. When Sylvia came on board, we went from using Comic Sans font to understanding that there's a whole world of type out there. But more importantly, she made us far more professional, I think.
Hey, at least you guys don't use papyrus. That's all I gotta say about that.
Papyrus, I miss it. I thought of it.
Comic Sans has great reading comprehension, fun fact. So
it does.
That's criminally underrated. Papyrus is the real villain. One
of the things that I actually wanted to tell everybody that they may not know is how I met you guys.
Oh, yeah.
Because Raythe Rain has been sort of my brainchild and incredibly lucky thing, but also has felt really fated because here's the deal. I met both Kat and Sylvia online, but they live in the same town I live in. Yeah, you heard that right. We live within walking distance of one another and met in random places online. And I was like, wait a minute. For when I first started Raythe Rain, I had no idea how to reach an audience. I had been writing fan fiction forever. And I was like, maybe I need to advertise this site I put my life savings in and see if there might be some people who will come read. But how do I reach them? And I had basically back in the day, it's really frightening. Everybody was into SEO. Well, make sure that you're the top search term on Google, the top site for these search terms, except nobody was searching for what I was selling. So I put my feelers out into the world and I met Kat. Do you remember that, Kat, where we met at the tea shop for years?
Oh, how you tell it is so different than the reality. It's so different than the reality. Okay, so I'm a huge horror person. And I found you because you were one of the only people doing original horror.
Yeah.
So I really liked that. So I signed up. And then I saw you posting on your live journal.
Ooh, live journal now that's taken over by Russian bots. Right. Yes.
Did you guys mean the 1980s?
Come on. I realize it dates us a bit.
It was 2010.
It was 2010.
Yeah.
God,
and you were posting on live journal and I was like, ooh, she's really been taken for a ride.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I actually journaled everything that happened in my search for artists, web design guys,
including the cultist weirdos.
Oh yes, the first Raythe Rain site was made by cultist weirdos. Yeah, I of all people again picked the cultist weirdos to do it, and I had to wrestle the site away from them. It was great. It was, and then there's the next guy that was totally crazy too after him. But we'll get into that another time. But yeah, so keep going, Kat. So you find out I was writing
the
vampires of Raythe Rain, literally. Good God. But. And the sad thing was I had 3-4 members in the beginning, one of whom was a pity sub, one of whom was a friend. Well, they were all pity subs except one. And one was actually real, but the others were pity subs. And Kat took us from that to thousands of members over the years. So it's stunning to me because it doesn't get any easier, guys, as they try to limit our reach. Like, you want to reach people who like gay romance? Well, let me show you how that's not going to happen. But Kat has been with me, since 2010, 2011, maybe like just in the beginning of 2011, March. So she came in when no one would have possibly believed in this after I'd been with the cultists and the other crazy weirdos. I was a little bit leery of her too, because I was like, why do you like this? Why are you going to help me? But she did.
All right, pause everyone. Now it's time for our star salutation.
Like, no.
Now we must do the ritual chant.
We must do our ritual chanting. Please everyone don't tell Raythe. This is totally normal, not a call. All right. All right. The 6 suck of blood. Done. Okay, good. We can continue.
And so Sylvia, do you want to tell the story of how we met? Because
yeah, sure.
It involved wine.
It did. We live in this, suburb. And I was getting my start doing book covers, and there was this forum at the time called K-Boards, which actually I missed so deeply. It was this period, it was like 2013, I think.
Yeah, the Writers Cafe at K-Boards. It was so good.
It was this period where self-publishing had really just begun to be a thing, and it was this incredibly exciting, enthralling time where it felt like everyone who had ever wanted to publish a book realized that they could, that no one was stopping them. And so then at the same time I was getting started. I published a few books under my own name, and there were much fewer good book covers at the time. It was just much less. It was not a professional environment.
Talk about papyrus. Yeah.
I mean, that was good. So I can't remember. I think you posted you were looking for a new book cover designer. You posted you were looking for a new book cover designer because you had some bad experiences. And I posted a link to my portfolio, and then I think we did a project together.
We did.
And it went well. And then I think when you went to pay,
you
saw my address. I live there too. And I was like, that is crazy. And so then I think we started just like meeting up.
Yeah.
And hanging out. I didn't really start coming to the meetings every week until I think like a few years in. It was sort of this like, I think what happened is we did the first redo of the website. Yes. That was sort of the big project that got me hooked into Raythe Rain, and that involved me literally going over every single illustration
my God.
that Raythe had done for all of the different books and retitling all of them.
Yep.
Because like they weren't actually that bad. It's just we wanted them just to be consistent.
There was a lot of Times New Roman just because, there you go.
Like everyone has different strengths. I cannot illustrate. Like that is not my skill set. So we're very lucky that it wasn't the other way around because that would have been really bad. But yeah, so, and then I just sort of started coming every week. And I remember, especially in those early days, it was a lot of just like helping people believe that we could do stuff.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of my time trying to convince Raythe of how awesome she is, because I think that she's such a driven person. She's such a deep desire to achieve that sometimes she can lose sight of what she's already accomplished. And so I just like to be I consider myself like font person / cheerleader.
And yes, both of these guys became good friends. I mean, that was what the most exciting part of it was for me.
I gotta say, though, that the two of us are not necessarily a great business match, because you just want to move on to the next thing, and I'm the eternal novelty seeker, dopamine driven, marketing gambler. I mean, that's like the profile of a marketer. It's like,
instead of looking at, let's put it this way, for those of you who don't know, there are probably over 30 serials on the site, 30 properties. But you know what Kat and I would do? I think I have to write a whole new one in order for us to advertise anything. We can't use the 30 we already have. No. And Sylvia would be like, guys, you've got the material. You just need to put it in a package that people can understand and come.
And I go, can I get new art for that?
Right.
Can I get new art for some of my ads?
Yes, always and forever. And I know that I always want to do that because I'm always very excited for what's the next thing. So we really just all came together, and and by the way, Jeremy too, although he's not with us today, also lived in town. He's our tech god. So if you've ever dealt with Jeremy, you know how wonderful he is. And he keeps the site humming along and stops it from being spammed to death and, gets you your passwords and helps you with things, and all this other stuff. So he too lives here. And it was just so stunning to have like the core group here, because I was used to thinking to myself, if I'm doing an online business, we're going to have people spread out over the world. And we do, by the way, like T-Wolf, she lives in Malaysia, and Mathia lives overseas as well. So it's sort of like to be able to have like the core group meet at my condo every week, have lunch, catch up on life, and then also talk business is like crack to me. So I wanted to sort of bring you guys into that a little bit, because I think a lot of you are just wanting to like, I want people to see how cool these two are. And I also want to share like what we're thinking about with you guys, so that you guys maybe share what you think about with us, because it's, that's where we want to go. We were talking about business, but we were also talking about romance, and we were also talking about games. We're also talking about, the state of media in general. But I actually wanted to bring this around to something that we've talked about, and I think that you as an audience can especially get into, because the frustration level I have. Romance is the #1 bestseller by far of books. It blows everything else far and away. I mean, it dwarfs it. And yet, think about where we don't see romance. How many movies do you see that have romance in them that aren't cringy and terrible, but truly like not a rom-com, although they're not doing those anymore anyway, it seems, but they don't do the romance, just doesn't play a role, right? You just don't see it. And if it is in there, for example, let's take Vampire Diaries, where there's the romance. Where is it done? It's put on the CW, right? It's not considered serious. It's not considered anything. In games, romance should be a huge part of this, but let's put it this way. How many games do you actually see where romance is actually taken seriously? Well, I will say that that's been changing. BioWare was the first to change it, although they fell off big time in Andromeda, and who knows, they're probably going to be, that whole studio is imploding right now. So it's the saddest thing I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. And I think Baldur's Gate really finally took romance seriously. And it was a breath of fresh air. Cyberpunk did okay, but I wanted to talk about, why do you guys think that romance, which drives this market out there, but I think because it's oftentimes associated with women, is somehow downplayed. And I think the women part is something that why it is downplayed. But what do you guys think? Why is it not considered like, why are they making more, for example, true crime than they're making romance, when we know that romance dwarfs true crime in terms of the audience and potential money that they have?
For a long time, I thought that it was just sexism, and I absolutely think sexism plays a role, but I actually think that it is incredibly, incredibly difficult to do a good romance story on a visual piece of media. There is this thing called Passion Flicks, which is basically a movie studio that was founded by a lot of top indie authors. And they've made a number of films based on indie romance books. I've tried to watch them. They don't appeal to me personally. Some of it might just be budget. Some of it just might be that I have very specific kind of romance books that I like to read, and those weren't represented. But I think a lot of it has to do with finding the right male lead is incredibly difficult. And the kind of guy that would be physically beautiful enough to fit the image that people have in their heads is oftentimes not emotionally engaging enough on screen to portray the kinds of things that they want to see.
I actually saw one of those movies on Amazon Prime, and I was like, this looks really good. This looks like one of those books I've seen. I'm like, it is, but the male lead, not good looking at all. But but he had the devilish flair, and I saw why they chose him. And so I think you're right. It's a mismatch to try to find the two that work together.
Right. That's why I think like someone like Don Draper from Mad Men is such a rare find. And it's really interesting because that actor is originally a comedy actor. And that's what he really wanted to do. He was not a serious dramatic actor. But he sort of fell into that role. And I think that's what you need. You need someone who has like the emotional intelligence and wit to, ironically, to be able to portray the sort of not flat alpha male, but to portray, because romance is fundamentally about emotion. Like even like erotica, I believe it's different. Like if you ever read erotica written by men versus erotica written by women, you can just tell that even when it's about sex, it can be about power or emotional dynamics or something. It's rarely just about like physical only in the way that I feel
not two dolls smashing their parts
in the
against
way
one
that I feel
another.
like sometimes porn can be. And so like I think it's very, very difficult for to represent that on screen because it requires an extraordinary amount of emotional intelligence and facility within the actors. I think it's an incredibly difficult thing to portray in a way that doesn't feel like cringy. If you think about like 50 Shades of Grey, like that really didn't work on screen. And I think that's probably a large reason why so many people are, I don't think that it's that Hollywood's a bunch of misogynistic assholes. They like money. They would do it if they thought that they could do it in a way that would make money. And maybe 50 Shades of Grey would. And I think people still have remarkably low standards for that. Sorry, but I think it's really an issue of it being actually incredibly difficult.
One of the things that bothered me about the 50 Shades of Grey thing was they actually had the actors talk about how they did not like one another.
Yeah.
And that was bizarre to me because in any other way, they normally have the actors pretend to be together in order to increase the engagement. But in 50 Shades, they actually made them act as if they were above the material that they were putting together.
Yes.
And it was so awful. I was like looking at this. They were making fun of the author. One of the big things in that book, I guess, was these jeans that the main character, Christian Grey, wore. And she took the time to find the right pair of jeans that she would match her vision and she felt that her audience deserved. You know what? They made fun of her. They like made fun of her on E. Like they literally sat out there and they were like, she's such a freak and a weirdo to do all this, instead of realizing, no, this is somebody who cares about her audience and wants this to be as close to the vision she gave them.
That's so ridiculous. If that was like a historical period piece, they'd be like, look at the dedication to costuming.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? I think you're right. I think that it's this interesting, weird thing that if it's going to be a romance, it involves other people who are actors being comfortable in those roles. And like, there's just a lack of comfort to it. I mean, because it's difficult. It can feel cringy or whatever. And they just like, I think that's why there's so many romances that have unhappy endings in movies. Like why the people are so more comfortable with a tragedy is because it feels somehow like it's grander or it's okay. You know what I mean? Versus like, if you're just giving, it's this like lack of comfort with it. But it's so dumb because no one has any discomfort like killing someone on screen.
Nope. And I think that if Jamie Dornan, the actor who played Christian Grey, had embraced that and gone out and been like, quite frankly, like trying to seduce the audience, I think that would have been far better. And yet it was almost like they said, oh yeah, it was almost like in every interview, they were like, oh, well, you're in the schlock, right? But we got to give the ladies what they want.
Right.
By the way, guys, I don't like 50 Shades of Grey for the most part because it's fan fiction with the serial numbers scratched off, and I don't think that's appropriate. But even though it's far from the base material, I thought that was humiliating what they did to Stephanie Myers, and I think it was bad. So I don't like 50 Shades of Grey. I also think it doesn't portray BDSM at all how it is. But I'm not defending it because I like this property. I'm defending it because, you know what? It made hundreds of millions of dollars and they still treated it like trash. And I guess my view of one of the things that Raythe is always about, and I'm sorry to go on my soapbox, going on the soapbox, I treat this seriously because it matters to me. It matters to my audience. Nobody's going to, basically chuckle behind their hand while they're taking the property that's out of my heart and in your guys' hearts and act as if it's not good enough, as if it would be better if it were, I don't know, a serial killer flick. And here's another thing I'm going to add. I want to add to that idea of not only is it hard to find the beautiful and the complex to get that, right type of male lead in these, they don't make these roles attractive to actors. Like, they don't make it so that everyone wants to be the next Scorsese pick. Everyone wants to be in these movies that nobody sees because they can say that they're serious films. But nobody wants to be in the romance flick or to be doing the Teen Wolf or all this other stuff. They just don't. They treat it like it's schlock. You don't make these roles enticing to the really good actors or the actors coming up. Nobody is going to take those roles seriously as they do others.
I also think there's a big problem with how you translate emotions onto a screen. Because in a lot of like straight up romance stories, it's not romantic suspense or action and adventure romance. There's it's a courtship. And it's really hard to cater to today's Western audiences, let's just say. It's more that they don't trust their audience. Like, the best romantic films I've seen have been foreign, and they've had lots of pauses. The pace has been slow. And it's like, can you imagine making a Tarkovsky style film today that would never fly at the box office? I don't know if you know who that is. Very avant-garde stuff. Anyway, it's like really slow. There's no score. And there's so much silence in it. And for a romance to take up that much time, you would have to have this steady courtship story. It's so much easier to throw bombs and stuff.
Well, it is. And I should say that there's stuff like Kdramas and stuff. They're quite frankly, how popular they are.
Yeah.
It's all about emotion. It's all about the will they, won't they, or how they're with each other and this and stuff and that. And it's so popular. And it hasn't quite translated yet. So I really should qualify that I'm talking more the Western market.
Yeah.
So forgive me, guys, if you're like, but. And it's always good to recommend stuff that you love in the comments so others can find it. But I feel like it's like they're so uncomfortable acknowledging this aspect of people's emotions, anger, despair, grief, rage, all this kind of stuff they'll deal with in droves. But you actually need somebody who is really good at examining, and this is another thing. A lot of the really good directors, you would need a good director, an extremely good director with a very high emotional intelligence in order to direct the actors and have actors of the same emotional intelligence to make this work.
I think the other thing too is that I want to drill down into thinking more about why these have success in foreign markets and not in the West. There has been this huge resurgence popularity of Turkish romantic TV shows.
Ooh.
Really?
And here's why.
Oh, yeah.
It's because there are all these dark romance girlies who like things that are very un-PC. That you cannot, even more un-PC than 50 Shades of Grey, quite un-PC. And you couldn't put that on screen in the West because it would just get too much. And I'm not even talking about stuff that's really, it's not like that bad of stuff is happening on screen. It's just the way the gender dynamics are played out that people would feel really uncomfortable with. And I noticed this a lot in more and more recent het romantic comedy. There is almost this feeling that the man is almost made unsexually attractive. He's sort of schlubby, he's sort of funny, but and that's always been the case if you think about When Harry Met Sally or whatever. But even that, and When Harry Met Sally, that guy sort of had he had an edge to him, right? There was a sexual charge to those interactions that I feel a lot of the male modern heroes in these rom-coms just aren't allowed to have, or I
think a classic one is actually Kevin Costner really hit it in The Bodyguard. Oh my God.
Yeah.
The stoic Yeah.
I didn't see that.
It's been a really long time. It's a really old movie, but for those who know, they know what we're talking about. Actually, I think you would find, because if you actually watch him, he's got some of that.
Yeah. And so I think, like, I'm trying to think, like, and, like, I especially think of, like, I actually really like Amy Schumer. I don't have problems with her that a lot of people have, and I enjoyed that romantic comedy that she did a while ago, like Trainwreck, but it wasn't a romance, because the characters themselves were so far away from being emotionally vulnerable and sexually appealing that it didn't work that way at all. And, like,
I feel it shows the West's discomfort.
Yes. They're almost like anti-romance, and then doing the beat plots of a romance, and it's just actively maybe my least favorite thing I could ever imagine to watch. Yeah. I'm like, I'd love to watch comedy, but I don't like. And I remember too, like, there are even stuff that are like, like there was that, or like making fun of it. Like there was that, I didn't even see it. It actually seems like it was really good. The Sandra Bullock movie where, like,
I did see it.
Yeah.
It was adorable. Yes, it was actually really good. And to be honest with it, I'm blanking on his name. Channing Tatum.
It was great.
He threw himself into the role. Great. The thing is, he took it seriously.
Yeah.
And he was hysterical. He was so funny. And if Sandra Bullock is just, I know she's America's Next Door Girl, but honestly, she's so skilled and talented and beautiful. I just love watching her.
That's great.
And the truth is that he was why it worked.
Yeah.
But again, he was still not playing. He looked like this big stoic guy, but he was actually a soft marshmallow, and he adored her.
Yeah, which is great, but, like, I think a lot of the romance plot, like, since the beginning of Pride and Prejudice, is taking someone who is not a soft marshmallow and exposing the soft marshmallowness of them. Even Harry Met Sally is that, right?
Yep.
He comes across, but they don't feel comfortable letting guys especially be not soft marshmallows on camera to start.
Yeah, I agree. I also think, let's look at the fact of Bridgerton.
Yeah, that was great.
Still
I liked Bridgerton.
Laugh my ass off that everyone was surprised how well this did.
Yeah.
I was like, hello, have you seen Pride and Prejudice and the 50 million versions that they've done of this?
Like Pride and Prejudice with sex? Sign me up.
And I thought to myself, I'm like, yeah, because guess what? It's all about the romance. That's as close as we're getting. And then it's like, okay, why are you all not grabbing onto these other properties to do? And it's still not really happening. It's often been straight men who do have disdain for the subject matter, who normally are the ones, quite frankly, who are being the directors of it, putting together the scripts, doing all this stuff. And so for them, if that disdain comes through, I think you see that, quite frankly, in Kathleen Kennedy's remakes of Star Wars. We had a huge problem with that, because if you don't love the source material, what are you doing creating in that world? If you want to create something else, you create something else. And I think that was, with Shonda Rhimes doing Bridgerton, it was clear she loved that material. You have to love the material you're looking at. But if you take material that you don't love and hand it to someone who doesn't love it, they're never going to understand what makes it appealing. And I think that's been, one of the things that made me upset about 50 Shades of Grey was that the author was allowed to have a lot of role in that. And she made that successful, but she was mocked for caring about the things that her audience cared about, and I just think that's the general push and pull there with this subject.
I think you are 100% right, because if you have, men in general, they're not allowed to express publicly emotions,
right?
Like, except for anger, maybe.
Right.
And so they've been, squeezed more and more into this narrow range of acceptable emotions. And so how are you going to find a director who is, as openly, wholeheartedly romantic as, like, Edward?
Right.
He's a rare find, because he's like, I love romance. I'm romantic. I love erotica. I think it's great.
I know,
and, you
right?
will not find a man who will openly say that. Although they're out there, because you look on Amazon comments of, like, these seemingly very gendered, Lady Violet's lover, and you'll get people named like Jim Smith. I love this book. I thought it was great. You know, like there's so many more male commenters in at least the Amazon comments section.
And in our, you know, in Raythe Frame too, when
Absolutely.
we have a large male representation, it's so nice to see that because
Yeah.
you just don't see it. And I think that gets lost.
But
But
like
of
a
course,
director would be completely on the spot. A director would have to be so secure in himself, and Hollywood is not the place for security.
Yeah, well, I think some of it is just what the environment you are in supports and breeds. And I think also there are people that might even be that way, but they have to transform themselves into something else in order to fit in, like you were saying. And I know that, like, I have my really good friend, you know, her husband co-writes with her and is like he's like a giant marshmallow romance softie. And there are tons of guys. I remember I met a guy once and he's like, I did a cover for him and he's like quite successful as one of the few male romance authors. He's also like very conventionally attractive, which very much helps. But
he's the whole package.
yeah, he's the whole package.
I have a face for radio guys. Let's put it that way.
Me too. But
We're just raccoons.
we're raccoons.
Raccoons.
Trash pandas. I think it's the shame thing too. I think even people who tell themselves that they are okay with it, like there's always going to be like a giggle. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the giggle is can actually be really okay when you're like writing or whatever, but like when you're acting, when you're on screen and you're doing a really vulnerable emotional scene, you can't have the giggle or it's just
Nope.
You gotta commit.
you
gotta
gotta
commit.
and that's like very
Expose
difficult.
yourself in a way. I mean, but think about the fact that, you know, romance exploded even more when there was the e-readers because they no longer, no
People
one
didn't
was going to
wanna
see.
show that they were reading it.
Yeah, that it mattered to them. And I think that it's hard for people to admit that this matters to them and that it plays a large role in their emotional lives and makes their whole life better. You know, it's one thing to say, I love James Bond. James Bond is my man or whatever. But yeah, I think that it's very hard for people to say, well, actually, you know, these romances where, you know, it's the fairy tale prince, it matters to me and it makes my life better. And people look at them like, oh, please.
Like, you're such a baby.
Right.
That's
Like
kids-
it's
that's
so
kids
unrealistic.
stuff.
Well,
Yeah.
so is being James Bond, but nobody's going to question you that you love him. Honestly, they're not going to do the whole romance angle of James Bond. I mean, they're never going to do that.
Well, because he's the male fantasy,
Right.
right? I mean, he has
The male hat fantasy,
romance.
just so
Sorry, the male hat fantasy, not to be too linear,
Yeah.
and not even all male fantasies. But
No.
he's that is a very stereotypical white male hat fantasy of
Yeah.
that, and that's sort of the point of it is look how much space that and
That's
superheroes
given,
and
yeah.
everything is given, and then I think you'll relate to this too, Raythe, especially. It's like when they do give people who are not white hat straight males fantasy space, it's not their fantasy, it's their tragedy porn
Yeah.
narrative. It's the call me by your names. It's
Right.
the and like for gay stuff, and then even for het stuff, it's like, you know, like, I don't know. I have so many feelings about Avengers Endgame and like the fact that the one female superhero, they had sacrificed herself.
Yeah, that's
Like,
pretty
it's like, so
typical.
even when they do give other people space in that narrative, it's like they just can't, like it still feels like it's not their voice or their whatever.
I think we'll wrap this part up because I do want to talk next time, and I hope you guys are intrigued by this idea about what is it like to enjoy reading something that you're not supposed to enjoy in romance. I think
Dark fantasy.
or in my case,
Forbidden.
incest, or all these other things, and why what are our views on that, and we want to hear your views too. So thank you guys so much for being here with our conversation, and we can't wait to hear what you all say and incorporate it into what we talk about coming up.